Hello, grounded Taurus. As August 24 and 25, 2026 unfold, something subtle may be asking you to look again at what you have been calling security. There comes a point when the thing you are most afraid of losing may no longer be the thing creating the deepest ache. Because what truly unsettles you is the thought that everything you spent years building could begin to shift the moment you stop holding every piece in place. Perhaps that is why you stayed long after some quiet part of you began asking whether the life you had built was still the life you wanted to inhabit. You may have carried an almost invisible belief that you were the keeper of the structure, the person who remembered what needed fixing, who remained when others became uncertain, who kept showing up because you knew what would happen if you did not. For a Taurus, attachment to what has been built can run much deeper than simple stubbornness when you have invested your time, loyalty, labor, and heart into something. Walking away from it can feel like questioning the value of everything you gave. Yet another question is beginning to matter just as much. While you have been protecting what you built, who has been making sure that you still have somewhere inside it to breathe? This is not a command to abandon your responsibilities, and it is not a suggestion that every uncomfortable situation needs to be left behind. It is an invitation to examine the difference between something being stable and something merely being familiar. Sometimes what you call security is simply a structure you have known for so long that imagining another way feels more frightening than remaining where you are. Even when that familiar place no longer gives your inner life enough room, there comes a moment when preserving something and preserving yourself can no longer be treated as the same decision. Pay attention to what is happening beneath the surface now, Taurus, because this is where a deeper kind of discernment begins. Everything around you may still look recognizable. The same room, the same responsibilities, the same people, the same routines that once made life feel dependable. And yet you may sense that something within the landscape has changed, as though you are standing inside a house you helped build, while quietly realizing that the rooms no longer hold the same meaning they once did. Perhaps the most difficult part is that nothing may appear dramatically wrong from the outside. There may be no single event you can point toward, no obvious reason that explains why something associated with safety now leaves you feeling strangely depleted. You simply notice that what once restored you does not restore you in quite the same way. And that realization can be uncomfortable because Taurus tends to value continuity. You know how to tend what has been entrusted to you, how to give something time, how to wait through difficult seasons rather than abandoning the work at the first sign of discomfort. That patience is a strength, but patience can become complicated when you begin using it to justify staying inside something that no longer reflects your deepest values. You may be protecting a partnership, a home, a career you worked hard to establish, a promise you once made, a financial structure, or even an identity you spent years becoming. Whatever the form, ask yourself something without rushing toward an answer. Is what you call security still giving your heart a place to rest? There was a period in my own life when I remained inside work that had gradually emptied me because leaving felt irresponsible. I had invested so much into making it function that admitting it no longer suited me felt almost like admitting that all those years had been wasted. I kept thinking that if I simply became more patient, more capable, more disciplined, I could somehow make the same structure nourish me again. Even though some deeper part of me already knew that effort could not manufacture what was no longer there. I also tried to preserve a home whose deeper foundation had already begun to weaken, because I believed that loosening my grip would cause everything around me to collapse. What changed me was not some dramatic revelation or extraordinary event. It was an ordinary stretch of quiet in which I finally had enough space to notice that I had spent so much time maintaining the structure that I had forgotten to ask whether I was still well inside it. That realization was difficult because it forced me to separate my identity from my usefulness. I had become so accustomed to being the person who solved, supported, organized, endured, and stayed that I had almost forgotten what remained when none of those functions were required. Taurus, you may understand this more intimately than you realize. When you commit, you tend to invest deeply, and once something has become part of your life, you do not casually discard it simply because a difficult season arrives. You can forgive, wait, rebuild, and try again long after another person might have decided that the effort was no longer worth it. There is something beautiful in that loyalty, But there is also a question hidden inside it. When does devotion stop being a reflection of love and begin becoming a way of avoiding the uncertainty of change? You may have learned to measure your worth by how much you can maintain, how dependable you can remain, or how little you ask from others while continuing to give. Perhaps endurance became part of the story you told yourself about who you were. If you could survive another difficult season, carry another responsibility, repair another fracture, then maybe that proved you were strong enough, loving enough, reliable enough. But who was keeping track of what that endurance was costing you? Who noticed the quiet fatigue behind your composure, the pressure that had settled into your body, or the private moments when you wondered what your own life might feel like if you were no longer required to be the steady one? People may have become accustomed to your reliability simply because you offered it so consistently. They may have assumed you would handle it, remember it, fix it, pay for it, organize it, or remain available because that version of you had become familiar. Yet your ability to be depended upon does not mean you must become emotionally immovable. Stability should give you somewhere to stand. It should not require you to become a stone so that everyone else can lean against you. Recovery does not come from becoming better at tolerating what drains you. It begins when your own comfort is allowed to become relevant, when you stop treating every personal need as an inconvenience that must be justified before it deserves attention. If a familiar heaviness returns during this period, listen before you dismiss it. Sometimes exhaustion is not telling you that you have failed to be strong enough. Sometimes it is showing you that the structure you have been maintaining requires more of you than it has the right to take. Your tiredness may be an internal signal asking for a different relationship with responsibility. It may be reminding you that rest is not something you earn only after everything else has been handled. You are allowed to enjoy what you worked so hard to create, rather than spending your entire life standing guard over it. You are allowed to ask whether the life you have carefully maintained still contains places where you feel curious, nourished, present, and genuinely yourself. And if something has become lifeless, you do not have to keep watering it simply because you once believed it would bloom. Releasing an old pattern does not automatically make you selfish, careless, or disloyal. Sometimes it means acknowledging that a season of your life has changed, and that continuing to force the same arrangement may prevent you from discovering what could grow in its place. The shift here is subtle, but important. You are moving away from the idea that freedom must come from abandoning everything, and toward the understanding that freedom can also come from choosing with greater honesty. Maybe the goodbye you sense is connected to another person, a role you have inhabited, a routine that has become automatic, or simply an old definition of what a secure life is supposed to look like. Whatever form it takes, it does not have to be treated as proof that everything you built was a mistake. Think of the weight you have carried as something you once accepted because it served a purpose. Perhaps it protected you, gave you direction, helped you survive, or gave other people something dependable to hold on to. But a structure can remain useful long after you have outgrown the way you once lived inside it. You may be discovering that the real question is not whether you can keep carrying it, but whether carrying it still belongs to the person you are becoming. Imagine setting down one heavy stone without immediately deciding what must replace it. Notice what happens in your body when you no longer have to brace yourself against the possibility of everything changing. There may be uncertainty, certainly, but there may also be a little more room in your breathing, a little more quiet between your thoughts, a little more awareness of what you actually want rather than what you trained yourself to tolerate. Taurus, you were never meant to spend every season constructing a beautiful shelter without ever allowing yourself to feel at home inside it. The point of building something lasting is not simply to prove that you can endure the labor of construction. It is to create a life whose stability gives you nourishment, dignity, comfort, and enough freedom to remain connected to yourself. And when something in your chest responds to these words, when a familiar heaviness becomes suddenly harder to dismiss, let that response be information rather than something you immediately explain away. You do not have to know exactly what changes next in order to recognize what no longer feels honest. You do not need a dramatic sign before admitting that something has become too costly. Sometimes transformation begins much more quietly, with the simple recognition that postponing an important truth has its own price, and that the life you are preserving deserves to be examined with the same care you have given everything else. There is another side to loosening your grip that you may not have considered, Taurus. When you stop holding every structure in place, other people may have to discover where their own balance lies, instead of continually leaning on yours. Relationships can begin rearranging themselves. Responsibilities can find new owners, and the life around you can develop a rhythm that does not depend entirely on your ability to keep everything steady. Your release does not automatically mean destruction. Sometimes it simply creates enough space for everyone involved to participate more honestly. If choosing differently still feels almost impossible, put one sentence somewhere you can see it. I welcome change, so I can return to myself. Let it be less like a ritual and more like a quiet acknowledgement that your own needs belong in the life you are building. Then ask yourself what you are actually afraid to surrender, because it may be certainty, a memory, a familiar role, or an identity built around being the person everyone could always depend upon. Give that fear a name, and once you can name it, you may begin to understand why holding on has felt so important. Somewhere, another Taurus may be carrying a similar invisible weight, and what you are finally honest enough to acknowledge may help someone else feel less alone in their own uncertainty. But releasing an old structure is only the doorway. What comes afterward can feel far less certain than the moment of decision itself. You may find yourself standing in unfamiliar territory where the old markers no longer tell you which direction to take. And this is where the deeper work begins. Learning what stability means when it is chosen rather than inherited from the life you already know. After stepping beyond what was familiar, you might expect relief to arrive immediately, only to discover a wide, unfamiliar quiet waiting for you. It may not feel peaceful at first. It can feel empty, strangely cool, almost as though you have walked out of a house you knew by heart and suddenly do not know where to put your hands. You are between versions of yourself, no longer fully comfortable inside the identity you carried before, yet still unable to describe what is taking shape ahead. And in that space, questions can rise quickly. Did I misread everything? Did I change too soon? Or was the life I imagined for myself never really meant to be mine? Even ordinary parts of the day can feel different when the routines that once organized your life begin to loosen. The familiar message may no longer arrive. The usual responsibilities may no longer determine where your attention goes, and beneath that change can be a deeper sensation of having lost the ground beneath an identity you spent years cultivating. Taurus, this is where your patience becomes important, because unstable ground is not necessarily barren ground. Soil has to be turned before something new can take root, and sometimes the first sign of renewal is simply discovering that there is finally room for a desire you had buried beneath obligation. You have not vanished from your path simply because the landscape looks unfamiliar. You are learning how to inhabit a life that has fewer instructions written into it, and that can be disorienting when you have spent so long knowing exactly what was expected of you. Some experiences are difficult to explain because they are not ordinary sadness. They can feel more like grieving an identity that once kept you safe while realizing you can no longer live inside it in quite the same way. Part of you may naturally want to return to what is known, because familiarity has a way of feeling comforting even when it was never truly nourishing. Be especially gentle with yourself in that space, because uncertainty can make an old pattern appear more attractive simply because it is recognizable. You may be tempted to restore a structure that had already become too small, just to escape the discomfort of having nothing certain beneath you. But you do not have to fill every quiet moment with distraction, and you do not have to mistake temporary discomfort for evidence that you chose incorrectly. Sometimes stillness is where you finally hear the difference between what you genuinely value and what you have simply learned to tolerate. I know that kind of quiet too, the kind that makes you reach for your phone almost automatically and wonder whether someone somewhere still needs something from you. Eventually, you may realize that the message you were waiting for was not really the thing you needed. What you needed was the reassurance that you would remain present for yourself, even when nobody was asking for your attention. Have you ever offered yourself that kind of loyalty? Have you ever sat alone in a room that felt unbearably unfamiliar, placed your hand over your heart, and promised yourself that your own peace would be allowed to matter? If you've never made that promise, you can begin with something very simple. Nothing elaborate has to surround the moment, and nobody else has to witness it for it to carry meaning. Your willingness to stay present with yourself is enough. As you become quieter, you may also notice certain patterns, memories, songs, numbers, or coincidences catching your attention in ways that feel personally significant. You do not have to treat them as proof of something supernatural. You can simply notice what they stir in you and allow your intuition to speak through the sensations, associations, and memories that surface when your mind is no longer crowded by constant responsibility. In that quiet, another realization may gradually become harder to ignore. Your worth does not need another performance to make it real. You do not have to keep proving it to your family, earning it through a relationship, or establishing it through the approval of friends and other people who have become accustomed to your reliability. You are allowed to exist as yourself without constantly demonstrating how useful, capable, or dependable you can be. And if these words bring emotion closer to the surface than you expected, if your throat tightens or your eyes become unexpectedly full, that does not mean you are becoming weak, Taurus. It may simply mean something you have kept buried beneath endurance is finally asking to be acknowledged. Think of a seed beneath cultivated soil, not as something waiting to become a completely different thing, but as life that has been quietly preserving its own potential beneath the surface. Growth can begin long before anyone else sees evidence of it, and your return to yourself may work the same way. It may be subtle at first, almost easy to overlook, yet still powerful enough to change what you are willing to accept, protect, and cultivate. Something within you is remembering that being alive is more than maintaining what already exists, and the quiet around you can give that realization room to become clearer. Your silence does not have to be a prison simply because you are unfamiliar with what it reveals. It can become the open ground where your own voice finally rises above the expectations, obligations, and needs that have occupied so much of your attention. You may begin to notice that what you thought was emptiness is actually space, and that what once felt like instability may be giving you the freedom to choose what deserves roots in the life you create from here. So rather than rushing to escape the quiet, stay close enough to it to discover what it has been trying to show you about what you truly want to keep, what you are ready to release, and what is quietly beginning to grow again. Instead, make a quiet promise to yourself and say, I allow silence to show me what is still true within me. Then, if you are willing to be honest about the places where you have felt unsteady, ask yourself when you last experienced that frightening sensation of having nothing solid to lean on. Share that moment if you feel comfortable, not simply as a story between you and me, but as a way of letting someone else recognize their own experience in yours. Because when you become still enough, the quiet starts revealing everything constant activity helped you overlook, the ache you kept postponing, the possibilities you never gave yourself permission to explore, and the desire you buried beneath one practical obligation after another. This is where the process becomes deeply personal. Think about the last time you chose something simply because it made you feel present in your own life, without needing to defend its usefulness or explain why it deserved your time. When did you last tend to a plant because watching something living respond to your care brought you a quiet sense of satisfaction? When did you prepare something beautiful to eat purely because you enjoyed the process, without waiting for an occasion or another person to make the effort worthwhile? When did you last put on music and allow yourself to listen without multitasking, without turning the moment into something productive? And when did these simple physical pleasures that once restored you become things you quietly decided you had outgrown? Taurus, perhaps life gradually taught you to become the person who keeps things functioning. Maybe there were people depending on you, expenses that demanded attention, or a position you felt you had to protect because it represented years of effort and stability. Responsibility rarely arrives all at once. It accumulates quietly until one day you realize you've exchanged pieces of your natural brightness for the identity of being reliable. The things that once made your days feel textured may have been pushed aside, and enjoyment became something you were always going to return to when everything else was finally handled. But those parts of you did not disappear simply because you stopped making room for them. They became quieter, waiting beneath the surface of the life you were maintaining. Listen closely and you may still recognize them. the pleasure of working with your hands, the melody you used to hum when nobody was listening, the familiar scent of something you loved preparing, or the satisfaction of watching something you planted slowly become stronger. These details are not insignificant leftovers from another version of you. They reveal what naturally brings you back into contact with yourself. You can maintain a perfectly functional life while becoming inwardly undernourished, and recognizing that difference is part of becoming honest about what you actually value. I understand that pattern because there was a time when I also separated myself from the things that made life feel genuinely mine. It was not because I had stopped loving them. I had simply begun treating my own enjoyment as though it were an indulgence I had to justify. I worried that giving time to simple pleasures meant I was taking time away from people who needed me, so responsibility always received the first share of my energy, while happiness was quietly asked to wait. Eventually, I had to admit that I was functioning well enough from the outside while becoming increasingly unfamiliar to myself on the inside. My body still woke up each morning, work still got done, and conversations still happened, yet something essential had become faint. The life around me continued moving, but the feeling that made it unmistakably mine had grown distant. Taurus, you do not have to measure your life according to someone else's definition of accomplishment, and you do not have to keep choosing what drains you simply to prove that you are capable of carrying it. What matters now is becoming more discerning about what actually belongs in your life, what deserves your energy, and what feels quietly true even when nobody else is impressed by it. Your deepest values may not announce themselves loudly. They may have nothing to do with recognition, status, or whether other people understand why something matters so much to you. There can be a particular kind of beauty in choosing what feels authentic simply because it carries your own imprint. As you begin living from that place, new possibilities may become easier to notice, not because some outside force has guaranteed them, but because you are finally paying attention to what resonates with your own values. You are not here to become a polished version of someone else's idea of a successful life. You are here to become more fully acquainted with the life that feels honest in your own hands. Go back for a moment to the child you once were. You did not need a practical argument for why a warm blanket felt comforting, and you did not need permission to sing when a melody moved through you. Building something from sand did not require a business plan, and creating a small world with your hands did not need to produce anything measurable before it was worth doing. There was an instinctive intelligence in those moments, a relationship with sensation, imagination, curiosity, and the physical world that existed before you learned to judge every choice by its usefulness. That part of you has not been erased. It may simply have become quieter beneath years of evaluation, responsibility, and the pressure to make every decision count. And perhaps allowing yourself to imagine returning to it brings some nervousness, because judgment can still have a powerful voice. You may wonder whether you are too established in your current life to begin something different, whether you have enough skill, enough experience, enough time, or even enough permission to want something simply because it brings you alive. But genuine enjoyment never required you to become an expert before you were allowed to enter it. It asks you to show up honestly and discover what happens when you stop demanding perfection from the things you love. It is like returning to a place you once cared for after being away for a long time and realizing that the connection was never completely gone. Stay quiet for a little while, and you may begin to notice a small sense of aliveness returning, not as some dramatic revelation, but as a persistent warmth that keeps drawing your attention back. That feeling may be the creative, sensual, grounded part of you that has been waiting for a place in your life again. And now you have a choice. You can continue treating that inner door as something unnecessary, or you can begin opening it carefully and discover what becomes possible when you finally allow yourself to cultivate what matters to you. Beginning does not mean you have to become an accomplished chef overnight. Write a book that everyone wants to read, or turn something you love into a source of income the moment you rediscover it. The first step is much quieter than that, allowing yourself to experience a life that feels honest when you are the one living it. Put that permission into words. If it helps you hear it clearly, I give the creative and sensual parts of myself permission to awaken again. Let the sentence be a small act of restoration, a way of reminding yourself that something does not have to be useful to everyone else before it is allowed to matter to you. And if there was something you once loved but gradually stopped doing because another person's opinion made you question its value, name it, say it plainly, because giving a forgotten desire a name can bring it out of the shadows and back into your awareness. Write it somewhere, speak it aloud, or simply let yourself admit that it still matters, because what becomes visible can finally be tended. Maybe you once dreamed of creating a small bakery, working with clay, restoring an old piece of furniture, growing herbs, making music, or simply having a corner of your life where your hands could create something without being measured by an outcome. Those possibilities did not become meaningless just because you postponed them. Some desires remain like seeds, kept safely beneath the surface, waiting for attention rather than demanding a dramatic reinvention of your entire life. You do not have to know exactly where they will lead. You only have to become willing to give them a little ground, a little time, and your first honest act of participation. Taurus, that is where your connection with Earth becomes especially meaningful, not as a stereotype about comfort or possessions, but as an understanding that what you value becomes stronger when you consciously choose what deserves to be cultivated. When you begin tending that inner ground again, the effect may reach beyond you. A person who becomes more alive in their own life often brings a different quality of presence into the lives around them, and the warmth you recover may be felt by people who have been struggling to find their own. The passion you once set aside does not need to become loud or performative. It can simply make you more present, more receptive, more willing to participate in the beauty that is already available to you. Let yourself become vivid in that quieter way, rooted enough to remain yourself while still allowing room for movement and growth. You were never erased by the years when you were focused on maintaining everything else. The part of you that wanted beauty, pleasure, creativity, and a life with your own unmistakable signature was still there, even when you stopped giving it much attention. And the recognition you have been waiting for cannot always come from another person. Sometimes it begins when you finally look at your own life and decide that what matters to you deserves to be taken seriously. Taurus, you do not have to abandon everything familiar to belong to yourself again. You only have to become more intentional about what you are willing to carry forward. So let the next movement be guided by discernment rather than pressure. Keep what genuinely nourishes you. Question what survives only because it is familiar, and allow your sense of security to become something you consciously build rather than something you protect at any cost. You can move forward with gratitude for what shaped you without remaining bound to every structure you once created. And perhaps as you loosen your grip on what no longer reflects your values, you begin to recognize the most rooted and fully alive version of yourself, not as someone waiting somewhere in the future, but as someone already beginning to emerge through the choices you are making now.